So we have an international break. And in that international break, last time we had an international break, we went into it having beaten Manchester United with that Declan Rice goal and, of course, Gabby Jesus' goal. And it just felt fantastic, didn't it? And this season, much less spectacular game, much less interesting game, but we did beat Manchester City, everybody's favourite for the Premier League. Everybody will tell you they're the best team in the world. And I would agree with them. I do think that Manchester City, the best manager in the world, and have proven themselves in the last season to be the best team in the world. But they still have to prove it all over again this season. And I'm going to come to that because there's a section, the main thrust of today's stream of consciousness will be gambler's fallacy. And I'm going to try and link it all together. But to begin with, my point is that in this international break, with so little football to focus on, I am going to have time to produce the kind of content which I'm always denied the time to do by endlessly having to react to things that happen in Arsenal from day to day. And with, a game every 3 or 4 days at the moment, you barely finished a reaction to a result when you've already got to produce a preview of the next game. Haven't got to. That sounds like I'm under pressure because people are waiting eagerly for my content. They're not at the moment, but I hope one day they will. And previews are a really good opportunity for me to demonstrate that I know kind of what I'm talking about and put my neck on the line. And reactions to just prove I've watched it, I suppose. I don't know. But anyway, this isn't what I love to do. It isn't the conversation. What I love to do in football is to take an accepted narrative and to try and find whether the truth is different from that narrative. So possibly my favourite video I've ever made is why Man City will not win the Premier League. And it had one of the best responses to it. I mean, it generated so many comments, so many views, so many hours of watch time. And, for a small channel, that's something that you really crave. And perhaps you shouldn't. Perhaps you should just make the content you like. But for me, it was exactly the response I wanted. And there was a lot, and it wasn't like it was universally popular. There were a lot of people who thought I was talking out of my hat because I was an Arsenal fan and it was just what I wanted to happen rather than what I believed would happen. And it's just not the case. I want, obviously, very much for Manchester City not to be the Premier League, not to win the Premier League for a 4th time in a row. But that's obvious. I mean, every other team's fans will say that. It would surprise me greatly if even Crystal Palace fans were like, "Well, I want to see Man City win it again." But obviously, there is a chance that Arsenal could win it, and to say otherwise is foolish, given how long we've spent at the summit of the table. We just didn't bring it over the line. One of the reasons we didn't bring it over the line is we're not experienced at doing that. The nerves got to us, and that's something that Man City don't have to contend with, generally speaking. And obviously it's tempting for me to go back and talk now about Manchester City. But as I said, this is about gambler's fallacy. And so what I'm saying is the time I have to make content is I'm looking at the league now with 8 games played, and I'm determined to draw some conclusions from that. Now, the obvious point to make here is you can't look at 8 games played and extrapolate that out over a season and therefore say, well, look, Tottenham just win it on the last day of the season with Arsenal coming second, City and Liverpool third and fourth. You can't do that. It's not as simple as that. But why is it not as simple as that? And that's a question that has become more important to me because I've seen so many Tottenham fans acting like they genuinely are in contention for a league title. And the reason I think they're not, and so I've started seeing these memes, by the way, where an elephant is clinging to a bowing branch of a tree. And someone said this about Arsenal last season, and I think it was pithy, but it got overused. It's like an elephant sitting in a tree. You don't know how he got there, but it won't stay there. Of course, it made less and less sense the longer we stayed on top of that tree, but ultimately we did fall. And so, this meme has been reinvigorated, but now it's Tottenham. And I think that's ridiculous. Tottenham are not yet sitting on top of the tree. They should not yet be a league table. It used to be traditional not to draw up a league table until at least game 3. But even at game 3, it doesn't really mean anything. It's a good indicator of how your last 3 games have gone, or as it stands at the moment, how your last 8 games have gone. But it's not really a good indicator of how a season goes, because a season doesn't really take shape till you've played everyone at least once. So there's at least another 11 games for that to happen. But what it does tell you is it does tell you the mindset of fans. It does tell you how desperately Tottenham fans want this glory, how hypocritical they are of us being so euphoric about our achievements last season when we were top. How disdainful they were of us for celebrating, as if had they been in our position, they would have just calmly ignored it until the very last day of the season. And now we know that's not true. We always knew it wasn't true. But now that they're jumping up and down talking about their realistic chance of winning the title, I don't think the meme should be an elephant in a tree. I think it should be someone riding a unicycle for the first time. Well, for the first day. Because there's that point, and I don't know if you ever tried this, there's a point in riding a unicycle or skating or skateboarding or anything like that, where you get quite a good, you're there, you cover quite a lot of distance and then you fall off. And I think that's what we're looking at here. But why is that? Why is it true that you can't extrapolate the first 8 games of the season? And this should be obvious, so forgive me if I'm patronising you by saying this, but the reason you can't do that is because it really depends who you've played. Under Patrick Vieira last season, Crystal Palace had a run of games. I don't think I've ever seen a worse run of games. I know it's not even physically possible, but it felt like for 10 games they only played teams in the top 6. And so when he was relieved of his duties and Roy Hodgson brought in, I genuinely thought it was a mistake, because I thought, look, I'm not behind the scenes at Crystal Palace. I don't know what's going on there. Maybe he had lost the dressing room. It's looking more likely now. Obviously, time has made that look more likely now. But I remember thinking, if you just wait until he gets the easy games under his belt out of the way, you can make a better decision. And that's the issue here. That for all that Tottenham are doing really well at the moment, they have played all 3 of the promoted teams, and none of those look like they're going to stay up, do they? None of them look like they're going to do a Brentford. So they've not only played all 3 of the bottom teams, but it's funnier than that, actually, because they've also played the 20th position team in the league so far, the 19th, 18th and 17th. I'm going to set aside a moment here, because you would have expected any team to beat the bottom 4 teams, not just for title credentials, but just for credentials, to make top 4. Particularly when you're looking at teams like Luton and Bournemouth, who really, Sheffield United, it took them 100 minutes to beat, but they did beat them. And so they have got the results, the expected results you would think that they would get. But looking at the Arsenal game, they were thrilled with that. They played really well. But Arsenal, I think, didn't win that game rather than Tottenham drew it. What I mean by that is we were overhyped and underperformed. And they overperformed expectations, and that resulted in what felt to us like a calamitous 2-2 draw, and felt to them like a huge victory, which I think says an awful lot about the state of those 2 teams. And when you look at it like an away draw to Liverpool last season was a 2-2 for us, and we were called bottlers. I know that it's different in the manner that you win the game, but ultimately, didn't Tottenham just get a 2-2 draw at, Arsenal and celebrate like they'd won? And didn't Arsenal just get a 2-2 draw and celebrate like a defeat? And what does that tell you? But the other thing is that they beat Liverpool, and they beat Liverpool at home, which is okay, which is good going, it's good form. Liverpool obviously are not the team they were last season. They really care now, and Klopp goes up in my estimation every single day for how he's managed to reinvigorate that side and get that winning mentality and that team spirit into team. It's still blending, So there's huge potential for this Liverpool team, and I'm certainly not writing them off for a title challenge. Sip of coffee. Tottenham have played really average teams. They also played Fulham in the League Cup and went out. They only have 1 game a week. Now, I want to detour slightly from the general thrust of the conversation about gambler's fallacy, and believe me, that's what this is about. I want to talk about this kind of thing, that the logical thing would be the fewer games you play, the more chance you have. But in a squad game, and assuming that footballers shouldn't play every 3 or 4 days for an entire season, and they should have rest periods, they might even have injury periods where they're out, or serve suspensions in the case of Rodri. But in any case, is it better to play once a week, as Tottenham now are doing, until the FA Cup, when for 1 week they might play twice, or the end of the season where I think everyone plays a couple of times a week? But I think we saw this last season with Arsenal out of all the cup competitions and Manchester City still in all of them, well, apart from the League Cup. And yet Manchester City use that, and a lot of people have talked about, within Manchester City, have talked about the rhythm. Pep Guardiola talked about it. He's talked about how you get into a rhythm as a player and you don't want to lose that rhythm. When we had that annoying draw against Liverpool, it was a week until we got a chance to play again. And we played West Ham, and then we opened up and started really well. And you just have a lot of time to dwell on things. I don't think young players benefited from that time to dwell on things. I don't think Tottenham's players would benefit from suddenly having a Premier League title so close. But I don't think it will be close. I genuinely don't think it'll be close halfway through the season. So I don't think it's going to be close when we talk about the end of the season. I don't think Postecoglou can quite believe the amount that people have decided to hype up what Spurs are achieving, because he said it himself. He said, like, normally it takes me 6 months at least to start getting things into this team. Looking ahead to the fixtures that Man City, Arsenal, and Spurs have, I think that the reality is that we're not really going to see Spurs fans fall off their unicycle until probably November, December. And then I think that they probably will have a really tough December that sets them straight. Now, one of the interesting things when you're looking at this is when you find a team that all three teams have to play. And in this case, Man City, Arsenal, and Spurs in their next 4 games all face Chelsea. And boy, how I wish we'd played Chelsea a couple of weeks ago. Because right off, I want to say I don't think Pochettino's going to win them the Premier League. I don't rate him as a title-winning manager. But I don't rate Eddie Howe as a title-winning manager either. And, I said this earlier, I am sometimes wrong, so I could be wrong on either case here. But I think they're really good managers. They build a really good team. They do a really good job. But that's not really the job at Chelsea. It's almost the antithesis of the job at Chelsea. The job at Chelsea is not building a small band of brothers that go off and beat people they shouldn't do and play attractive football. It's make this team of Galacticos come together. He's going to get players. It's clear that Chelsea are buying players that managers aren't asking them to do. Anyone who thought Graham Potter had any say in transfers is obviously wildly wrong. Lampard in his time back didn't have a chance to do that. But now they've gone for Pochettino. Maybe he has had a huge influence, but I don't see it. I don't think so. I'm not sure that he's the man making decisions, but he needs to become that quite quickly. But in any case, what I think he is a very good man manager. I think that Pochettino is somebody who understands the importance of morale and of personality, and I think that he knows how to instill confidence in players. I love the story about him and Mudryk practicing crossbar challenges, and he noticing that Mudryk was getting really upset he never won. Managed to frame that for him in a way that, look, the word yet is often missing from people's vocabulary, I think. It's like, I'm just not good at that. Yet. See what a difference it makes? We can never beat Manchester City. Yet. You just keep going till you do. The only way you can definitely guarantee an outcome is by quitting. And that's true, by the way, and that's doubly true in YouTube. So I know that if I stop making these videos, then the channel will definitely never grow. I don't know if by making these videos, the channel will continue to grow, but I do know that if I stop making them, it will stop growing. And that's not something I want. So I'm not going to do that. So click like and subscribe, for God's sakes, will you? Just because I really need you to. And because you might find there's value in this and you don't want it to disappear just because you couldn't be bothered to click like, right? Shameless plugging, shameless promotion over.
Go for it.
Chelsea, therefore, are the team that all 4 of us have to play. And so we play them next, and it's our first game back from the international lull, the interlull, whatever you want to call it. And they're on a bit of a bounce at the moment. Pochettino's got them believing. Mudryk is playing really well. I mean, I only saw the first half of the game against Fulham last week, but the first half I saw, they looked like they were at it. Mudryk looked like he was good. I mean, Broja scored. That's a difference, isn't it? Although that's not me saying I think he's a terrible player or anything. I don't know enough about him to say that, honestly. But I do think, and I think should be obvious to everyone probably agree with me for the first time ever, is that Chelsea look like they've got a bit of their mojo back. I don't think that necessarily means they're going to finish top 4, but I could definitely see them finishing the European places. And right now, come on, Chelsea fans, you'd take that, wouldn't you? I suddenly realised I said Chelsea fans, and I wonder how many of you are Chelsea fans. If you're a Chelsea fan watching this and you've got to this point, please click like and certainly leave a comment. I detest you all. It's just true. But some of my best friends have been Chelsea fans. But as a fan base, as a collective, the collective noun for Chelsea fans is a Surrey of Chelsea fans. So I would say this looks like, you have the resources. And I also want to detour a little bit just to talk about Todd Boehly, because it's so easy to paint him as a total idiot. And I think in footballing terms, he most certainly is an idiot. But what he reminds me of is a theatre impresario, what do you call him, a producer, somebody who knows what is going to make money, but doesn't necessarily know much about the art form. So if you've got £1 million you want to invest in theatre or film, and it won't get you far in film, but if you had £1 million, it's a stupid thing to do. And it used to be true in football. The quickest way to lose a fortune was to invest in a football team. But I think there are some changes coming that will paint Todd Boehly as less of an idiot. And I would take this seriously now, because I think that whilst winning silverware raises your profile, so does having the best players in the world, by the way. People that play Chelsea on FIFA, I play Paris Saint-Germain. If I absolutely want to win, I play FIFA 22, I play Paris Saint-Germain, because, they've got the best players. Obviously, the players in FIFA don't have morale issues, and well, maybe they do. Maybe it is that complicated. I have noticed that actually, that sometimes when you're losing, your players play worse. So there must be a statistic in there. But generally speaking, if you're just playing a one-off match, you best play, not a league or not. You play the best players, and you more likely win. And if football was like that, Paris Saint-Germain would have a couple of Champions League titles, but they don't. And I think the same is true at Chelsea, which feeds back to this morale thing. But Todd Boehly knows that the World Cup in America is going to change football. It's going to change football in ways we can't see now, and that's the thing, because you can't predict the future. It's very difficult to predict the future at the best of times. The last American World Cup sowed the seeds for the MLS, and that's a growth industry hugely. Todd Boehly bought Chelsea because he can see that the money that's coming into football is going to be huge. Does he need Chelsea to win things in order to capitalise on that? No, I don't think he does. I think it's also part of what underpins the Glazers not wanting to sell Man United cheaply, because whatever your football club is worth now, it's conceivable it could be worth double that in just 2 or 3 years. And you don't really want to sell something for 5 or 6 billion and then find out you could have got 10 or 11 billion for it. But Chelsea, if they get relegated, obviously that's going to be a huge problem. They're not going to get relegated. They're going to win some cups. They're going to win some, and they're going to become that kind of team that people like and that people predict good things of. And Pochettino may not be there at the World Cup, but maybe Todd Boehly at that point will bring in somebody like, I don't know why they didn't bring in Luis Enrique. I think he would be perfect for them, but I think Todd doesn't really want someone getting in the way who wants so much transfer responsibility. So when I look at it, I think, is Todd Boehly an idiot, or is Todd Boehly actually one of the smartest men in football, who doesn't know anything about football? This Chelsea team are suddenly unencumbered by the weight of expectation. One of the problems Arsenal faced last season, we won as much silverware as Chelsea last season, just to be clear, although I wouldn't swap. But one of the problems we faced was suddenly the weight of expectation changed. It's the same thing this season. Arsenal have started off, and every game, when you look at it, we've won 6, drawn 2, and everybody's talking about how it's only after beating City that people are now talking about us as serious contenders again. So expectation plays a huge part in football. But Todd Boehly's Chelsea, I think, are going to be a big money-making enterprise for him, and he knows it. And one of the reasons, as I said, in the interview that he gave, or the speech he was giving, he said that, look, if you look at it from a business point of view, Saturday morning, 9 o'clock, the eastern coast of America, which is where all the money is, where a lot of the money is. Sorry, California is huge, I get that. But, East Coast United States, it's a huge market. And at 9 o'clock in the morning, they can settle down and watch Premier League football. Don't know how they can deal with the adverts. I don't know how they deal with them at the moment. I know when I was last out there, they used to just put adverts on during the game, which is completely unbelievable if you're an English supporter. But Chelsea only need to keep buying the best players so that they keep appearing on FIFA, so that people keep playing them, so their profile is high, so their commercials are good. And if their commercials are in touching distance by the World Cup, and there's no reason why they won't be, they should be a top 4 team by then he will coin it in. And I don't know what he's going to do with that. Just use it as a money-making pot or sell it, whatever. But there'll be certainly a lot of people want to buy Chelsea after the next American World Cup. So, but coming back to now, it's a game we're so buoyant after beating City. It's going to take a lot for Arteta to get people's feet back on the ground, I think. We'll head into that match at Stamford Bridge. and I think a draw will be a good result for us. Chelsea play Tottenham, and it's their third game in the sequence. So forgive me, I don't know the exact dates at the moment. It's a stream of consciousness. I'm not looking anything up, but it's the third game they play. So it'll be in about 3 weeks after the international break. So it'll be probably, I'm guessing, mid-November they play them. By which time they should have beaten Fulham at home and got an away draw to Palace. So they could conceivably be still top because Arsenal play Chelsea. And if we get a draw from that, then obviously, and they beat Fulham, then they'll go 2 points clear of us. If they draw at Palace and we beat Sheffield United, it levels out again. But, if goal difference stays exactly as it is right now, and it might well do, then they'll still be top. They might be buoyed by that and they might pull out a miracle result against the Chelsea team that I think will beat them, but I don't know that for sure. And Man City play them in the fourth game. So Man City have some tough games before that. They have Brighton at home. I still think they'll win it. But if they don't, then the narrative about Manchester City is going to change dramatically, isn't it? I guess the overall thing I'm saying here is that Chelsea is the one thing that you can see. Look, we will go away and probably draw away. Man City play Chelsea away, and at that point will possibly draw away as well. And Spurs might well beat them, but they're playing them at home. Spurs in the next 4 games, I think, will beat Fulham at home, will draw with Palace, will beat Chelsea, but might not do. And if they don't, and they go away to Wolves, and Wolves do what they did to City, then here's a scenario. You're talking about 5 points from the next 4 games. Arsenal, I think, get a point away to Chelsea. I really hope we do. I'd hate to see us get beaten before Spurs do. Then we play Sheffield United at home, which is 3 points. Newcastle away, which, being generous, I'd give us a point because you all saw what they did to Paris Saint-Germain if their dander is up. And Burnley at home, whereas another 3 points. So I'm predicting that we will have 7 points, Spurs will have 5 points, and Spurs will be behind Arsenal, and all of their fans that are still talking about potentially winning the Premier League will be doing so. Well, there'll be less of them doing so, and they'll be doing so with even more scorn from everyone else, and they won't be the elephant on top of the tree or the person on top of the unicycle. Coming back to Manchester City. Man City, everybody's saying that they're treble winners. They were treble winners last season. This is not the same Manchester City team that played last season, though. They have some notable absentees. And they will still have some of those notable absentees. John Stones is back and fit, although I don't think he didn't look himself yet when he came on against us. But then I think we stopped them playing at all. But they are without Kevin De Bruyne. They are without Ilkay Gundogan. They are without Riyad Mahrez. They are without these key players. They are not the same team. They're not able to play in the same way. It surprises me so much that Pep Guardiola, who I do think has control of the transfers at Manchester City. In fact, I'm sure of it. He wouldn't have taken the job. One of the reasons he took the job at Man City was because there's no tradition of winning, and it wasn't like a Bayern where even when you're winning, people are giving you a hard time. So he has control, and yet he didn't go out and buy a replacement in Doku as a right winger until the start of the season, and he let Palmer go to Chelsea, and who looks quite decent. I don't think he's quite good enough to get in a City team. I think he is quite good enough to get in Chelsea's team at the moment and could thrive there. But this Manchester City team have lost 2 games on a bounce for the first time in 5 years. So it's obviously different from last season. Grealish is not the player that he was, and I think he could yet find his form, but there's something not quite right. I thought when I did my video about why Man City weren't going to win the league, it did kind of include the idea that they were going to lose Kyle Walker to Bayern Munich because that looked like a done deal. And it also included the idea that Silva, because he'd begged to leave now 3 seasons running, would be allowed to leave. Instead, they made Kyle Walker captain, which I think looks to me an awful lot like they did it just so that he wouldn't leave. And he might not necessarily be their best captain, and I don't know how Kevin De Bruyne feels about it. Maybe they're going to do what we did before and say, we've got 2 captains. We've got a similar problem with Declan Rice and Martin Odegaard, but I think with Rice new to the team, he's not expecting to just become captain. He seems like the kind of guy who is happy being a team player, not necessarily the ego that you see in a Kevin De Bruyne. But I think Kevin De Bruyne's ego is the reason he's one of the best players, if not the best player in this position. So I don't begrudge him at all. But I think there's going to be a bit of resentment in that camp and a certain amount of fatigue in the Man City team. Man City last season had not won the Champions League. They had every reason to be focused and determined. Players like Grealish had a bad season the season before, and he played his heart out. I think Rodri is so important to a Man City team this season in a way that he wasn't last season. But for the idea that, I think when he's out of the team, they lose 3-10. When he's out of the team this season, they've lost 3 out of 3. The Leipzig away win could have gone so differently. We could be looking at a team that's lost 3 and drawn 1. Obviously, Alvarez's stunning goal made the difference, and Doku coming on made a difference. But this is not the same Man City team, and here's where we get to gambler's fallacy. People always say, well, Man City win all these games, therefore they'll win all these games. They beat Wolves last season, so they'll beat Wolves this season. It obviously doesn't work like that. In football, you have to think of it like driving a car. You have a windscreen, which tells you an awful lot about where you are and where you're going. And you have a tiny little rear view mirror, which tells you where you've been. And that's the level of import that you have to put on it. If you'd looked just in the rear view mirror at the start of last season, you would have seen Arsenal would fall away quite badly and be lucky to finish 7th or 6th. It didn't happen. Why didn't it happen? Well, because the past informs your future, but your future is what you need to be looking at. You need to look at the relative strength of the teams before they go into a match. The relative strength of the Spurs team is not good enough to win the Premier League. Saying Maddison is like the greatest thing that happened to Tottenham, quite possibly true, but they have lost Harry Kane, who arguably was the best thing that happened to Tottenham. Son had a terrible season last season, and now he seems to have found his form again. But Richarlison, for all of the, his re-establishing himself as a potential striker, is still not scoring. And Kulusevski's still not banging them away. And look, there is a reality to this. I know they went down to 10 men against Luton. But Luton are a team that most people could see doing worse than Derby did. It might be Sheffield United to do worse than Derby did. It could even be Burnley. But I think one of these three is about as bad as the Premier League's ever seen. All three of them together. To get 9 points from them seems like a given. But Manchester City are not the same team. Now, they have a January transfer window, but they're not the same team, and they don't have the same manager. Now, this could be a more controversial thing I'm saying. Manchester City have the best manager in the world. But I don't think he wants it anymore. I don't think he wants to be there anymore. I think his idea to extend his contract was because he wasn't sure he was going to win the Champions League. I think if you gave him an option now to step away and not do something he's never done before, which is break his contract, he would go. He looks like he's... And so from a body language perspective, one of the things you know from body language is that if a person is moving from foot to foot while they stand giving a presentation, the exact speed at which they move from foot to foot is the speed at which they want to be walking away. When you see him in press conferences now, he's a little bit more jittery and a little bit more agitated, and he has to literally self-comfort more. He touches his nose a great deal. He does lots of things that you didn't see from a Pep Guardiola when he's confident and he's determined and he's hungry. He is a workaholic. He puts so much pressure on himself. This does not come easily, winning the way that the way that Pep Guardiola does. It takes a huge toll on him. After he left Barcelona, he famously went away, took a year off before going to Bayern, thought the Bayern project was right for him. The time he spent there showed him that what he really needs is a club like City. Now he's done everything he wanted to do with City, and I think he has a draw towards, as he said before, South America. Brazil. That job is apparently already spoken for. Carlo Ancelotti is already going to be the Brazil manager. But surely if you were Brazil Football Association, you would look at Pep Guardiola and pull out all the stops to get him for the World Cup, wouldn't you? So I would see that must be a strain on him. But he hasn't put the same effort into the rebuild this season as I was expecting. Yes, Guardiola's come in. That was a long-term transfer. And Guardiola looks like a great player. He did at Leipzig. Yes, he signed Doku. And, he's a young player, but he burst onto the Premier League and looks exciting and a player that I love to watch already. But what about the Calvin Phillips situation? Why isn't that resolved yet? Why has he begged Kyle Walker to stay when, Pep of old would have had a replacement in there already, had players that could play in there already? Why is he relying so much on Rodri without any backup at all? Why isn't there a Kevin De Bruyne type coming in? Somebody who's the right side of 30 that has prospect ahead of him. Maybe I'm missing it. But in any case, to say that this City team is the same City team that won the treble is to overlook the absentees, the players who've left, and to understand that maybe the motivation and the hunger isn't quite there in the way that it was. It's worth just talking about the Arsenal game, because I saw a lot of Man City fans and they're very cool about it. They're like, we always do this. We always start the season badly. Yeah, but that doesn't mean you always finish it well. Saying in the past that we've always done really well in November, December, or after January That's like going to the well every day and just assuming that you put the bucket in and pull out water. Sometimes you go and the well is dry. Being in touching distance by January isn't necessarily true anymore. If I look at their next 4 games, I think they'll beat Brighton at home. Don't know with Brighton though, do you? Brighton are that kind of team at the moment, but they're struggling under a weight of expectation that I talked about earlier. And then you look at that Man United away game, and if Chelsea are experiencing a little resurgence, I think Man United might be as well. That last gasp winner against Brentford, I think, has done them the world of good. Man City fans, as I said, were all kind of stoic about it. This happens. It's not the end of the world. It doesn't matter. But what they're not talking about is just how out of ideas Manchester City were when they came to the Emirates. Last season, Pep really threw the cat among the pigeons and changed his style of play. They had the game-changing Kevin De Bruyne in there, and they humbled us a little bit. They out-thought us and outmaneuvered us, and this time it was completely opposite. For all that it was a terrible game, people tell you that Arsenal didn't really play that well. Yeah, we did. We stopped the team that won the treble from playing. It was made easier by the absentees, but we had our own absentees to talk about. We've had our own injury issues when we've played Manchester City, and we weren't allowed to talk about it. We weren't allowed to say, "Oh, we were missing players when we played them." When we had to go away to the Etihad with Holding as a centre back instead of Saliba. Say what you want about whether we would have won the league or not with Saliba still fit, but we would have played better than we did that day, and I think that was demonstrated by Saliba's performance against Erling Haaland this time round. Is Erling Haaland being exposed as not a very good striker? No, I think he's being exposed as a player who cannot rely on Gundogan and Mahrez and Kevin De Bruyne to provide fantastic assists. I think Alvarez is not providing the ball, he's not playing the ball to Erling Haaland as much as one of those 3 players would do. Bernardo Silva, to me, looks like he's not quite interested anymore. Looks down, and that Man City team, for all the fans' stoicism about, it's just Arsenal, it's about time they beat us, and that doesn't mean anything. The reactions of the players, not just in going off the tunnel and having a needless argument, but also when that goal went in. There's still 5-10 minutes left, depending on how much injury time. It turned out, I think it was actually 7 minutes left of the game at that point. Or am I wrong about that? It might have been 9 minutes, sorry. But they didn't look like they were going to do it. They didn't look from the 70th minute. They didn't look in the second half like they were going to score. People talk about, we had the better chances. Ake skied a shot. That happens. But they had, 1 shot in the second half? How's that the same team? It's not. If you're going to predict the future in football, don't use the past that much. Look at the relative state of the teams right now. The reason I don't think Spurs are going to stay top is because I don't think their squad's good. In summary, because even I'm getting to a point now where I've got to stop talking. In summation, Manchester City are not the same team they were last season, so predicting that they're going to win the treble because they're going to behave like the team that played last season is silly. Spurs are a person learning to ride a unicycle. You have that little spell right at the beginning where you go for ages, 8 or 9 seconds, and then bam, you fall on your arse. And I think they're going to fall on their arse at home to Chelsea, but they might fall on their arse away to Palace or Wolves as well. By December, what I'm anticipating is that Arsenal will still be there or thereabouts. We will have had an awkward game against either Chelsea or Newcastle or both. Man City will probably drop more than 4 points in their next 4 games, and Liverpool could be on top of the table, something like that. And that's how I'd be betting right now. By the end of the season, if I extrapolate this forward, I think Arsenal have grown, but we need a January transfer because we can't rely on this back. We've got 6 defenders at the moment. We can't rely on that for a whole season. Although Tomiyasu was brilliant when he came on. Incredible to see Tomiyasu in the penalty area, nodding the ball down, using his height to nod the ball down for Kai Havertz, and Kai Havertz laying the ball off to Martinelli, who without question got a huge slice of luck, but boy did he deserve it. And we may be going out there and bringing in a morale-boosting striker in the January transfer window. We might augment the defence. Jurrien Timber might be back sooner than expected. Thomas Partey might have had a run of games and be playing really well. I think Arsenal this season are going to win the league. Big surprise, right? The Gooner channel suggests Arsenal are going to win the league, but I'm a believer. I am a believer. I think one of the reasons I'm a believer is that Arteta shows me all the time that he can learn and grow. Last season, his performance as a manager was brilliant, but his substitutions weren't proactive enough. He didn't trust his bench at all. He didn't rotate players well, and he got the emotions wrong for games and was too stubborn with players who were out of form. Although we didn't have so many players out of form last season, so it didn't really show quite the same way. But this season, in that Man City game, the questions were there. The emotions of that team, you got the emotional state of the players absolutely spot on. We looked calm all the way through. Having players like Jorginho and Saliba on the pitch really helps with that. His substitutions perhaps could have been more proactive, but he waited until City played their hand, then he played his hand. And, well, you have to give a 10 out of 10 to anybody who brings on 4 substitutes that all combine to score a goal. Come on. The 4 subs he brought on scored the winning goal. That's a good set of substitutions right there. Does he rotate the team enough? Well, he left Saka out. Even though he could perhaps have played Saka, he didn't. He could have started with Partey and Martinelli, that's obvious now, but he didn't. He trusted players, second string players. I still don't think he's doing enough to trust Emil Smith-Rowe, but he sees him every day in training and I don't. Kai Havertz being dropped was another really good sign that he's not going to be so stubborn with individual players. So all in all, health check from Arteta. Looks like he's learning those lessons. Looks like he's not just a great manager now, but one that can still develop and still has room to grow to become every bit the best manager that Arsenal have had. A good combination of George Graham's ruthlessness and determination and Arsene Wenger's ability to spot great players and create a coaching and training environment that gets the best out of them. And man management. The players love him. So, for me, if you take that into consideration as a huge factor of why Man City have won what they've won, was Pep Guardiola. He has been the difference. Then if Arsenal in Arteta can find something close to that at a time where Pep himself isn't quite there and Ange Postecoglou isn't that for me, Pochettino isn't quite that for me, then, if we have the best manager and we have one of the best squads assembled, certainly if you look through our squad, when you look at Jesus, Odegaard, Saka, Martinelli, Declan Rice, Thomas Partey, William Saliba, Gabriel, Zinchenko, Ben White, we have a phenomenal team. Going to leave the goalkeeper up to you. I would have gone with Ramsdale. Having watched the game twice now, I can see that Raya was actually a really good choice. But, when he was flapping or felt like he was flapping a bit at the beginning, I was worried that maybe this was an element of Arteta who's being too stubborn. He did say that he'd had 2 occasions previously where he wanted to rotate a goalkeeper and hadn't done. But anyway, as a stream of consciousness goes, this one's kind of got to its natural conclusion. I thank you if you took the time to listen to all of this. I'm very grateful that you did. I'm very, very, very grateful. If there was a way I could press a like button for viewers, I would press your like button right now and I would subscribe to you. Please don't take that as an invitation to offer me a sub for sub. I don't. But certainly share the channel. I'm not aware of it, and you let me know about it, and I watch it and I like it. I will definitely like and subscribe. That's what I'm doing. That's what you should do. Till I see you again, or till I hear from you again. Hey, lucky! Lots of love.